Welcome and thank you for waiting. All participants are in a listen-only mode for the duration of today's webinar. Today's session is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the webinar over to your host, Crystal from the U.S. Census Bureau. Crystal, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Crystal Jimerson, a training specialist here at the U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you for joining us today as we continue our webinar series with a starting guide to income and poverty. These webinars are a great opportunity for you to learn from our experts about how to access the Census Bureau data, tools, and resources. If you wish to follow along, take a moment now to open an additional browser. You can also register for the webinars by visiting census.gov/academy. Before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few important housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome written questions during the webinar. Please submit your written questions using the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom center or the right side of your WebEx screen. Please take a moment to locate that now. Once you found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose All Panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your question. We suggest keeping the chat panel open as we will provide key links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind, you won't be able to respond to the chat. That is for us to send out links and other resources related to the presentation. My colleagues will be monitoring the Q&A panel, and as time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your question with the presenter to respond to during the webinar. If we do not get to all the questions with the response during the webinar, we will post the questions and responses with the webinar materials on census.gov/academy within 30 business days. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser such as Chrome or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Lacey Lofton. Thanks again for being here today. Lacey, you may begin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. As Crystal just mentioned, my name is Lacey Lofton. I am a statistician here at the U.S. Census Bureau, and I'm really excited to be here talking about some of our income data. It's one of our most popular data sets from one of our most popular surveys. It's one that I personally access every day, and I'm hoping that this will be a great intro for some of you who may not have used this data before. So I am currently working in the data dissemination branch. I've been with the Bureau for over 21 years now. And our job with the data dissemination branch is to make sure that the public has access to the rich and vast data that we have. So we have 103, I believe, surveys going on at all times. We're constantly collecting and then tabulating data. And so we want to make sure that we have this data. We want to make sure that the public actually has access to it. So you understand what we have, how to access it. It's all free and publicly available on our website. So we have a lot of different resources through our branch, and this is kind of going to give you an outline. First of all, we can bring our experts to you. So we are located throughout the country. In some situations, we can come to you physically. If not, though, if you've got a group of people together that want to really understand a specific topic or something that's very important to your group, we can certainly set something up where we're focused exactly on what your team's needs are. We also have a lot of resources that are just available online on our website at all times. So one of them are data gems. These are short videos that focus in on something really specific. So there are a lot of our pain points. Sometimes if there's something that you're getting stuck on, you're probably not the only one. So we have data gems to cover some of those. And then we also have full courses. So we have courses that'll take you through, it literally can be hours of different topics and subjects that you can find anytime, 24 hours a day on our website. And then bring to the last bullet here, we have webinars. So this webinar is being recorded, as was mentioned. So I'm glad you're joining us live today, but also if you want to access this later, we'll include the transcripts, the PowerPoint, and the recording as well. So those are available to you at all times on our website. If you need to get a hold of us, you can just reach out to census.askdata@census.gov. There's a phone number there as well, and we'll connect you with somebody who's located physically in your location. So for today, what we're going to be walking through, this is just a broad general outline. First, we're going to just basically talk about what the Census Bureau does, and then we'll talk about common uses of census data in general. We are going to be focusing on income data today, and specifically, we're going to be focusing on income data from the American Community Survey. So we're going to start at the beginning and really define what that survey is. We'll put it in context with some of the more well-known programs that we have, specifically the decennial census, but I'll also talk briefly about some of the other surveys that have income data that might be useful for you if you have a really special use need. We'll talk about how this data is collected, because to understand the data, it's important to know how we got it. And then we'll talk about availability and the content. That's when we'll really zoom in on exactly what data we have that pertains to income and poverty across the country. We'll have there's a list my colleagues are going to be putting in the chat as we go through the links that I'm discussing. So you'll have those as they come, but they're also at the end, we'll go through all of those resources again. And then we'll do an online demonstration. So we will spend hopefully about 15 minutes doing 3 different walkthroughs of how to use data.census.gov to specifically pull income data. We'll look at how to pull tables. We'll also look at how to create a map, which is a really cool feature that we have on data.census.gov. And then we'll wrap up, and any questions that you have that weren't answered during the presentation, you'll have a chance to ask those at the very end of the presentation. Okay, so the Census Bureau, we've been around for a while in different forms, but we've been taking censuses and surveys since 1790. It's one of the first things that the country started doing. So it started out as kind of a niche thing. We were doing the decennial census every 10 years, but it's really grown. And as I said, we have over 100 surveys and censuses that we're conducting at all times. And we are the Census Bureau is the largest federal fiscal agency. We now do things for other agencies as well, so we can be contracted by other departments within the government to collect and analyze and produce data for them. And our mission overall is to serve as the nation's leading provider of quality data about its economy and people. Common uses of census data. This is one my friends ask me a lot. There are a lot of different ways that people use this data, and I'm probably talking to many of you now. But state and local agencies use census data, different surveys and censuses for basically assessing their areas, assessing the programs that they have, looking at what their population does have, what they might need, because we can identify some of those areas of needs. And then also for just providing information to the public about the areas that they're governing. Nonprofit organizations use us. I mean, writing for grant writers is a really big deal. So if you are looking for a grant or to justify a need for your community or your organization, you usually have to have data to back that up. So in order to do that, you come to us, and we have a lot of great, really ready-to-go products that go into a proposal or a grant proposal that are really set and ready to go. So that's a popular one as well. Business owners and entrepreneurs, this is very similar in some ways, but if you're looking for a marketing plan or you're looking to expand or grow your business, using census data to prove that there's a need in an area or prove, just information about the general public in an area, we're used there a lot. Elected officials certainly use this data in order to make decisions. That's really one of the main reasons this data is collected and produced. And then library and other educational institutions, just understanding whatever area of research you're in, whatever you're looking for, we probably have something at least close to it, so we cover a lot of area. So we're going to start out just talking about the American Community Survey, but as soon as I say that, we're going to have to go back one step and talk about the decennial census too. So the decennial census we've been doing since 1790. Most people have heard about that. We use it mostly for apportionment and distribution of federal funds. So understanding where people are physically located at any given time, so that the house can be reapportioned among the states. But now more and more, that also is a major data set that's used for distribution of federal funds. So understanding really where people are. Now, this is a full census. The decennial census is a head count. So we attempt to count every single human being residing within the country. And we do it at a single point in time. So the last census was April 1st of 2020. And we attempted to geocode every single human in the country to a specific area. So we had really granular data, but it's a very small data set. So it's really just a count of people and housing units and identifying where they are. The American Community Survey actually started within that decennial census program. So starting in 1990 and 2000 in different forms, actually throughout the decades before that as well, we had this long form. So 1 in 6 households would get a long form, and it had questions about how you get to work, what you do for work, who lives with you, information about, the basics of like race and sex and ethnicity, but then also like, tell us about your household, tell us about the makeup of your household. So it had a lot more rich information, and that questionnaire changed over the decades depending on what the government's needs were to make good decisions. Because we have computers now and efficient ways to reach residents with mail and the internet, we were able to pull that, like what used to be the long form from the decennial census out into its own separate program. And we were able to do that fully and integrate it in 2005. So now we have this American Community Survey, which replaced the long form during the decennial. And it's going on every single month in every single county or county equivalent throughout the whole United States. And what's great is now we're able to produce data that is timely. Data coming out every 10 years gets really stale really quickly. So the American Community Survey not only has a much more rich data set and really tells us about not only where people are living, but how they're living and about their lifestyles and what's happening in their households, but it also gives us the ability to produce that data every year. So you can see how things are changing more quickly. One of the main differences here, and we'll talk more about it later, is while the decennial census was just who's living and sleeping somewhere on April 1st, this is a period of time. So when we're referencing American Community Survey data, the most recent release was 2023. So for 1 year data, we're looking at every single household that we sampled between January 1st and December 31st of 2023. We also have a 5-year data set, which is would be the last 5 years. So it would be 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, and 2019. And what we do is we group all of that data together, and then we provide it over that 5-year period for all the same geographies. So the reason we do that is because we can then produce data down to lower levels because we have a bigger sample set. But it is important to remember that this is a data set that covers a period of time. And then finally, there's a lot more characteristics here. Unlike the decennial census, which is really short and simple, this has a lot of information about how people are living across the country. A couple more details. It's a household survey, so we are only able to send questionnaires to physical locations that we are aware of. So it's a nationwide household survey that does include any housing unit or group quarters throughout the country. Our sample size is very big. It's 3.5 million addresses that we choose each calendar year. It is designed to provide communities with reliable information in 4 main subjects that we'll talk about in just a few minutes, but that's social, economic, demographic, and housing. Again, it's produced every year, and it is still technically part of the decennial census program, even though it's operating all of the time. How we collect the data is important because when you're looking at it, you'll want to make sure you understand exactly where it comes from. So it starts with, we send out a questionnaire to a household, and again, that's why we need to have a physical address. We will say, hey, please fill this out, go online. You can go online and fill this out. It's a really simple platform. You'll go through and send us the data. But there's also a couple other ways you can do it. You can call in and give us your data that way. You can also request a paper form. And then if we don't hear back from you, we may send a field rep to your house in order to collect the data that way. So they'll just enter it into a laptop. It's really important that we keep a high response rate for this survey, and it is mandated by law because it's part of the decennial census. If we don't have a great response rate, then the data is not reliable. So we do a lot to make sure that we are able to collect the data that's needed to produce solid data every single year. Just for reference, this is the exact number that was in the ACS sample last year, $1,544,357. Okay, we're starting high and we're going to drill down into income and poverty data very specifically. But there are four main topics from the American Community Survey. And what's important about this is that you can cross-tabulate data with any of these topics. So income is really important to know, right? I think most of you are here for that, to understand income and poverty. But just knowing what the income for an area is not necessarily what you're going to be looking for, right? You're going to be looking for income by families with small children, or income by housing costs. And so all of these topics we're about to cover are things that you can cross-tabulate and really drill down and understand where income fluctuates, why it fluctuates, and how it compares to some of these other variables. So just really high level, we have social, that includes things like education. So you could look at what is educational attainment by income for an area. We have marital status, relationships, and that's relationships within the household, fertility, and then grandparents who live within a family and take care of their grandchildren. Economic, this is going to be the highlight of the day. We have income, employment information, occupation, and then how people get to work. For demographic, these actually reflect the exact same questions asked in the exact same way that we did the previous decennial census. So you can go back and compare this specific section of data to the 2020 census in this case, and know that you're comparing apples to apples. So just 5 main data points there: sex, age, race, Hispanic origin or not, and then housing units. Last but not least, housing. We have a really, that's actually I think one that's overlooked often for the Census Bureau, is we have a really awesome data set of information about the housing stock of the United States. So occupancy and structure, housing values and costs, and then also your basic utilities. And that's just, again, there are a lot of subcategories under there. So if you're looking for information about the housing stock of the United States, we've got that for you too. Here's the longer list. I promise you I'm not going to read this to you, but I did think it was important to have here. It might trigger some questions, and I want to make sure that we hit any of those that come up, repeatedly. This is a more drilled down list of the data that we have by those 4 categories. And if there's any questions, type them in the chat. We'll try to circle back to them. I do want to point out that each of these areas sometimes have a slightly different universe than, say, every human being in the country. So, for example, we start asking for information about your income and your job and your employment at the age of 16. And that's because if we started asking, I have a 9-year-old, if we started asking him what his current job status was, it's not impressive, but I'm hoping that over time it will be. So we are looking to, make it the data less biased by including really the universe of human beings that it applies to. So obviously earnings and jobs starts at 16. That's an important one for this conversation. For educational attainment, we don't start asking that question until someone is 25. Certainly there are people who finish their education before that. There are people that finish their education after, but that was the number that was chosen to be that kind of threshold. So we don't start asking for attainment till 25. If you have any questions about these, there's a glossary that I'm going to introduce at the very end of this that will actually tell you, there's an index and a glossary actually, that'll help you understand exactly what universe and exactly how we define these different things. All right, let's start focusing on income. I know that's why most of you are here. It's kind of an abstract concept for a lot of people, right? We think of income and then all of a sudden there's like these very technical definitions. So I do want to walk through this. So specifically the American Community Survey, we collect information on wages, salaries, commissions, bonuses, and tips from all of the jobs that you're working, right? So if you are working more than one job, we'll collect information for each of those places that you're employed. For self-employed income, from your own non-farm or farm business, which includes proprietorships and partnerships. We also will collect any income that you have from interest, dividends, net rental income, royalty income, or income from estates and trusts. Social Security or railroad retirement information is also collected. Supplemental Social Security income. Any public assistance that you might receive or a household might receive is collected as well. So there's a long list of that we'll get into later. Retirement income, so however retirement income is received for a household, if that's pension, survivor, or disability income. And then any other sources, and we've got a long list of those as well, but veteran payments, unemployment compensation, and then child support or alimony are some of the bigger ones there. Okay, this is how we tabulate the data. So we ask questions about all of those different things that I just read to you, literally from the list, and then we tabulate it into these different areas, and you'll see this when we start looking at the data. But employment status, so we start again asking that at 16. How do you get to work? Again, we'll start asking that when it's 16. Occupation and industry and class of worker. We also ask about income and benefits based on those different categories that we just discussed. Health insurance coverage is a big one. Sometimes that's associated with the job, sometimes it is not. And we capture that too. So we'll say, do you have health insurance? And then if you do have health insurance, do you have it through, how do you have it? So we can tell you if it's associated with an employment. And then finally, poverty. We're going to talk a little about this in the next couple slides, but we have information on households that fell below the poverty level in the last 12 months. And we publish all of this data for two different groups. We publish that for individuals and families. And actually, in a lot of the cases, we'll have households as well. So depending on what you're looking to understand, those are, I'll say, three categories that I think are really important, and we'll talk about what those different things mean. How do we measure poverty? This is, for better or worse, has not changed in a long time. So it's a pretty standard definition that we've had since the 60s, specifically since 1963. But it was during the Johnson administration, and we were looking to understand more about households and families and individuals that fell below that poverty line. It is basically 3 times. So to start out, I should back up. For the official poverty measure, we do not differentiate based on geography. So if you live in downtown Manhattan, or if you live in rural Idaho, the poverty threshold is going to be the same. And it's a very, very simple calculation. It is literally for the people residing in a household that are related by blood, marriage, or adoption. The assumption is that people that are, that's how we define a family, living together because of blood, marriage, or adoption, that they share income. If there's somebody else in the household that does not fall into those categories, they wouldn't be included in this calculation. So we'll just count that number, and it's literally 3 times the cost of the minimum food diet from 1963. But that said, it is adjusted to today's prices. So it's literally just 3 times what it would cost to feed all of the individuals of a family. Literally just multiply it by 3. So this is a slide that I've included. It'll be easier to see when we're able to post it. I made it as big as I possibly could, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding of what that looks like in practice. So for one person, so it's just somebody living in a house, a household alone, the threshold is $15,480 for 2023. There is a little bit of a difference between people under 65 and people over 65, and we do that for multiple reasons that we can, there's actually a great document on that. If you have 2 people in the household, then we start looking at, are any of them children related to you under 18 years? So this is the breakout. It only goes to 8 or more, but depending on how many people live in your household, and then very specifically dependents, so children under the age of 18 living with you, we have a different threshold for each of those. So when we're looking at the percentage of households or people living in poverty, it's going to be based on these numbers. Again, this is going to be included in the PowerPoint, and I believe, thank you very much for putting that link in the chat. But it's a great reference piece because it does change depending on the number of humans in a household, and specifically the number of children under the age of 18. As silly as it may sound, one of the things when we're talking about these different data points and how we collect things, one of the things that I reference the most still after 21 years is the actual survey. When you're looking at a data point, oftentimes you'll be like, okay, first of all, we're the federal government. We don't always use the most normal jargon. So we might have some words that just seem a little strange, very statistical in nature. And you really want to understand, like, okay, what does that mean? Where does that come from? And my go-to is always just literally go to the questionnaire. That's included here as well. So you can go to the questionnaire and see how the question is asked, and that really helps you understand the answers. I chose a really simple example, so this is not here to like blow your mind or challenge you in any way, but just as an example, this is on the left is a screenshot of a table that we're going to pull together in just a few minutes, but say, we're looking at class of worker. And it says civilian employed population 16 and over, and you've got private wage and salary workers, government workers, self-employed, and then unpaid family workers. And you're like, okay, that's cute, that's nice. What does that actually mean? Like, what are we actually talking about? And this is where going to the actual questionnaire and seeing, okay, these are the different sections. And so if somebody checked one of these boxes, this is how it applies, and this is how that data was collected. So specifically for private wage and salary workers, it's nonprofit, for-profit and nonprofits. When you're looking at government workers or government employees, you've got local government, state government, active duty, and then federal government. And then for self-employed and then also unpaid family workers, these are the options that people were able to choose when they're filling out the questionnaire. Like I said, this is actually a really simple example. You probably could have figured this out just by looking at the tabulations on the left. But for some of our more complicated or complex data that we publish, it's really good to go back to it. One of the examples is how do you get to work each day? And so we have information on carpooling or riding the metro or public transportation, and that's a really long list. And then it's combined for tabulation into these kind of smaller categories. And so to understand what falls under each of those categories, the best place that you can possibly go is to the actual questionnaire itself. Touching quickly on the data releases and the data thresholds that we have. So we're going to talk about geography next, but for areas that have an estimated number of humans of 65,000 or more, we're able to publish these one-year estimates. So specifically right now, that is the ACS 2023 one-year data. So everything we collected from January 1st through December 31st of 2023, we have a one-year estimate. And that's because we have enough people and therefore a big enough sample that we're able to publish data for just that 1 year period of time. Once you get below that threshold, we are never going to disclose information about an individual household, an individual, or a business. And once you get below that 65,000 threshold, it's harder for us to be able to publish that data because the sample size is smaller. We have a little bit of supplemental data. We're not going to go too far into that today, but we do have for 20,000, 65,000, basically some supplemental estimates that we come in with. And then for basically every other geography, we will attempt to publish 5-year estimates. So again, it would be 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, and 2019. We combine all of that, and we will publish that down to a really low geography level. We'll publish that down to the block group. There's a lot of great resources on our geographies because they're a little abstract. They can be a little hard to understand. But basically down to your neighborhood, like your very small neighborhood, we will publish these data points that we're going to talk about down to there. The low end for a block group is about 1,200 people. So you're looking at a very small geography that we can give you all of these different data points for that we've been talking about. The release dates are approximate here. They change slightly every year, but the 1-year estimates in general come out in September. The 5-year estimates I'm sorry, I might have just said that. 1-year estimates come out in September. 5-year estimates come out in December. So you can mark your calendars for that, and we get the release dates months and months and months in advance, so you can know exactly when those are coming out. Here are the geographies. So specifically, obviously we produce for the entire nation, which is great to know, right? It's especially a great comparison or threshold if you're looking to understand how your specific area, your neighborhood, your state, your county matches up, right? It's great to know that the percentage of people living in poverty in an area is 6%, but if you don't have something else to compare it to, it doesn't mean nearly as much, right? So we'll publish data for the nation. Over here on the left, we have zip code tabulation areas. I'm just going to go through the more popular geographies that are used here. Zip codes are something that the general public knows very well. You know what zip code you're in. You probably know where kind of the zip codes around you are. Because they change at the will of the Postal Service, which they should, their delivery areas is what works best for them, but they can change at any time. And so basically, so that we can have data that's comparable over time, every 10 years during the decennial census, we'll take those areas, the zip codes, and we'll freeze them. And we'll draw a boundary around those zip codes, and we call them zip code tabulation areas. And so we will then publish data for those zip code tabulation areas for the entire 10 years. So this is kind of our response to zip codes. If you live in an area that's changing really rapidly, it's possible that, on year 8, year 9, you're gonna have a slightly different geography, but they should be fine to compare over that decade. We have American Indian and Alaska Native and Hawaiian homelands. Next down, we have regions, which is just cutting the country into 4 large parts, not as useful as it probably used to be. And then we have divisions, and then states. So states is when we start really getting into understanding where you are, right? Under states, we have school districts, which is one that not many people know about. So if you're trying to figure out data for your school districts, you don't have to struggle trying to make it fit, a round hole, a square peg. We actually already have those boundaries. We're producing data for those, all of the data points we already talked about. We have information by congressional districts. And then over on the right, we have places. That's our term for cities or towns or census designated places. We have public use microdata areas. Those are chunks of land that have about 100,000 people in them. I'm not going to go too far into that. We also have Alaska Native regional areas and state legislative districts. So whatever your current state legislative boundaries are, we've produced data for that as well. We have counties and then county subdivisions, which are created. They're just literally subdivisions of the county. Depends on where you are, how many of those are broken down into. And then actually census tracts, those are designed they're designed by the Census Bureau with the help of local governments to be chunks of land that have about 4,000 people in them. We're going to explore that a little bit. And then block groups is the smallest area that we produce the American Community Survey data for. And that is between 1,200 and 800 to 1,800 is kind of the main variability there. So I didn't include this in here, but I will include it before we publish this, a couple of webinars that will talk you through geography, because this is a really interesting topic, and it helps you really choose what areas you're looking at if you know more about the geographies. Okay, so we're going to jump into data.census.gov, which is our main platform. It holds a lot of the different surveys that we produce data from. If you happen to have, say, a laptop near you or a second screen, or you can even minimize this and you want to follow along, that's great. Any hands-on activities is, obviously helpful for remembering, but it's also a pretty intuitive system. So I think that you can always go back and watch the recording, but also once you've seen a couple of demonstrations, I think that it's something that you can use yourself to access at home. Okay, this is our landing page. What's really funny about it, so if you just want to know the average income for the United States, you can type that into the search bar. It will come up with the answer you need, but I'm assuming that most of you are here because you're looking for more detailed information and something that's more granular. So everything we're going to be walking through today is actually here under advanced search. It's like the most small button for one of the most important things that we have. So just remember, that's actually the thing I get a lot of calls about is where's that? Again, it's just this advanced search down here in the right corner under the search bar. And what it does is it brings up all of the filters that you can use to, this is a massive, this is just a massive platform with a lot of data behind it. It's pulling directly from our API. And you're just going to filter down and filter down and filter down. And the more you filter, the more specific the results will be. And then you'll look at the tables. And you'll look at what data is available for all those different filters that you chose. While we walk through this, I want to give you a couple pointers, things that I've lost sleep over or needed blood pressure medication for. This is where you're going to pop up. I'll actually just give you a quick example. I'm going to go, so if you choose states, most of the time it'll have all of the whatever geography you chose. When I click on all states within the United States, it pops up. Oh, come on. Okay, good. I was like, I hope this isn't down right now. It pops up into this filter area. And I promise you there will come a day where you've chosen something you didn't mean to, or you thought you chose something and you didn't. So just keep an eye on this section right here, because this is what it's going to be filtering all of your data for. So if you don't have in this filter what you expect to have, you're not going to have the results that you want. I'm going to start actually out with there's 3 main things I want to walk you through. So there's a really specific data product that we provide that I think is going to be really useful. So that might be worth jotting down. It's called our data profiles. I'm going to show you how to pull those. And then I'm also going to do, we're going to pull income and then poverty information for different areas within the country. And we'll look at how they compare to each other. And then we'll also look at how to map that information too, because it's really easy to see that, right? A spreadsheet does a lot. There's a lot of information you can glean from that, but seeing it visually is really helpful too. So I want to make sure that you guys walk away having the ability to do that. Okay, so I'll just walk through these sections. Save yourself the heartache and headache, and trust me on this, start with your geography. If you start with geography, figure out what geography you want to use and start with that. It makes all of the remaining filters so much easier because it will only give you options that are available for the geographies that you've chosen. So they're in this order for a reason. Start with the geographies. We're just going to start high level and we will drill down, but we're going to start out by just looking at all of the states within the United States. Next up, we have topics. So specifically, I'll walk through a couple of these. We'll start looking at underemployment. It'll come up with all of these other topics within that. And you could certainly choose these. We will actually in our next demonstration. But all of these have different subtopics, and you just click on every single thing that you want to include in your search. Again, make sure that you're not excluding information by being too specific. But this is where you would come if you know like exactly what you're looking for. If you really truly know, like especially if you're doing a grant or some type of business proposal and there's specific verbiage that they're looking for specific things. This is a great place to do that. But under topics, you really do have to know specifically what you're looking for. I'm going to go down here to surveys. We're only talking about the American Community Survey today. So we're gonna focus here. There are 1-year and 5-year estimates, as we discussed. I prefer to stick to the 5-year estimates, and let me tell you why really quickly. All of the states in the country have more than 65,000 people, so we do publish 1-year data for every single state in the country. But I've wasted a lot of time using 1-year data for an area and then wanting to compare it to a small area, right? So I'll be looking at Texas, which certainly has 65,000 people, and I'll have this awesome idea in my head, and then I'll want to go compare it, Texas to a zip code. And all of a sudden that zip code doesn't have 65,000 people. And so you can't be using the same data set. If you stick to the 5-year estimates, you never ever run into that problem. There's certainly, arguments for 1-year data. If you want to know, like if there's been a major displacement of humans or housing or a major influx of humans and housing, and you want to see, what is happening right now. And most currently, 1-year data is going to be your best bet. If you want more versatility, your 5-year estimates are going to be the best. So I'm going to go here for 5-year estimates. And these are all of the different products that are available. So if we're not picking a topic, these are just the products. So picked our geography, now we've picked American Community Survey, and now we're looking at the topics available. There is such a wealth here that we don't have time to go through. Just going through these tables individually would probably take another hour in itself. It's worthy, but it's not something that we have time for today. So I'm going to specifically point you to my favorite because I'm biased, but here we all are. And we're going to look at the data profiles. There are only 4 of them. And this is kind of a theme throughout this presentation, right? There's these 4 different sections of data that we really focus on from the American Community Survey. And that is social, economic, housing, and demographic. I'm going to go down here. So we've chosen data profiles and click on search. And here are those 5 data tables that I just mentioned. So they're not in order, just to mess with you a little bit, but here's your demographic information. So this is sex, race, ethnicity, and basic housing unit information. Here's your social characteristics. This is educational attainment, the makeup of households, information about, the makeup of households, educational attainment, and educational enrollment. This is where we're going to focus. This is selected economic characteristics, and then housing characteristics as well. So we're going to have 3 examples here. We're going to start with selected economic characteristics, and I just want to show you how these tables look. So and how they work so that you can access them yourself from home. And if like I said, if you ever get stuck or you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. So across the top is going to be all of the geographies that you've chosen. So we specifically chose every state in the country. So those will be all the way across the top in alphabetical order. And then over here, we have all of the economic characteristics that this is a really great overview from the ACS. It's just your overview of economic information. So first we have employment status. It specifically tells you it's 16 or over, information about people in the labor force, information broken down by sex. We have information about who's in the workforce and has young children at home, information about all people in the workforce that have a young child at home. information about commuting to work, and this gets really specific, but for, depending on where you live, that's something that a lot of people study. Some basic information about occupation and industry. Here's your class of worker, which was actually that example that we had looking back at the questionnaire specifically. Here's income and benefits, which is adjusted for inflation. These are our two most popular, so I'll pause for just a minute and focus on these. So you've got median household income and mean household income. We publish both, so they're both, measures center. But let's look across this table and see how you can compare things and how this data might be useful. So for the average, let's go with median household income. For Alabama, you've got 62,000. And then for Alaska, it's 89,000. And for Arizona, it's 76,000. For Arkansas, it's 58,000. And we could go all the way across. I'm going to show you how to download this table, and then I'm going to show you how to map this data as well. But it's these comparisons, either comparing over geography or comparing over time, that really help you understand what you're looking at and where the contrasts are and where the needs might be. To go down a little bit more, we have information about the earnings that went into those income and benefits calculations. We've walked through these more specifically. And we usually have this broken down by families and households. So again, a household is just even one human being living in a housing unit. So it can be a single person living there, somebody with roommates, whatever the situation may be. A household that is a family is anybody living in the same household that is related by birth, marriage, or adoption. And we produce all this data for both of those categories. So if you wanted to specifically look at median or mean family income, we have that here as well. And then we have non-family households. Here's your information about health insurance, and then also where that health insurance comes from. So are you insured? And then if you are, how do you have your insurance? And then we get down to the percentage of families living in poverty. So this is a really big one, right? A lot of people want to have a number that you don't have to dive too deep down into it. You just want to understand the well-being of people in an area, and certainly people who fell below the poverty level are an easy and quick way to look at kind of the needs in an area. So we have it broken down by families, married couple families, family with children, and then also broken down by all people. So this is a table. To download it, and I'm actually going to show you a couple of things. The margin of error is produced for every single data point that we have, and it's important. I'm not ever going to diminish margin of error. I love it. I think it's a great tool to have for every single data point. But if you're trying to simply look at a table, or especially if you're handing this off to somebody who kind of gets tired looking at all these numbers, you can make that go away and just look at the data that's available. It makes it cleaner. It makes it more straightforward. And then if you want to download the data, depending on what you're looking for, most of the time I'll download these into an Excel file, but certainly depending on what you're looking to do, you could use a CSV or a zip. We also have information if you look to cite this data, we give you the verbiage so you don't have to guess. If you want to share this information, print it, go straight to the API, chart it, or map it, and we're going to actually walk through the maps in just a second. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you download it into Excel. So this is what that table looks like. Let me make it bigger. So the first page, and this is fairly new, I say that, I've been around a long time, so maybe it's not as new as I feel like it is, but this is awesome because you will think that you'll download something and remember forever what it actually is. You won't. So this first page tells you exactly what you're looking at. It gives you the link to go straight back to it. It gives you the link for the API. It'll tell you what the year is, exactly what you're looking at, and then a whole lot of more data. But this is what the data actually looks like. So this is a really quick and easy way. I'm going to scroll down. This is the exact same thing we were just looking at, just download it, make it bigger. And let's say you specifically want to look at the at people living in poverty. Did I just scroll? There we go. Percentage of people living in poverty with children living with them under the age of 18. Quick and easy way to do it. So Alabama, 18.2. Then you've got Alaska, 6.8. Arizona at 8.9, Arkansas at 11 points. So you can really see these variations for these very specific groups of people. So again, all of this data is available at all the geographies we talked about at all. So you could look at counties within a state. You could look at census tracts within a county. This data is available for all of those different places. I'm just starting big and we're going to drill down lower. I'm going to minimize this quickly and show you how to map it. So when we picked our results, it came up automatically to tables right here. If you want to map this data, which is one of the most fun things you can do on a Friday night to dazzle all of your friends, to map this awesome data, we've got this built in. So a lot of you may use your own GIS software, but if you don't have it or you don't want to, even though we have it, I mostly use this now because honestly, it's so user-friendly. And right here is every single data point that we just had on that entire table. So you can go and say, let's look at the number of people. Let's go to with private health insurance. So we're going to click this. The map is going to update, and so you can see where people with private health insurance live across the country. So the darker areas are over 72%, all the way to 78, and then you look at these really light areas, you're under 38, reach 38 to 38%. I guess there's just one, and I'm not even seeing it. But if you look at these lighter areas, 38 to 60%. So you can really see where people have health insurance if you wanted to look at that, how they're getting health insurance, and this is a much more human-friendly way to express this data. Okay, I'm going to a second example. Before I do, are there any questions that have come up over and over and over again in the chat? Am I missing anything super major, or can I go for the next, say, 8 minutes? I'm going to assume that means go. Okay, great.
Lacey,
Yes.
Lacey, there is one question that did come up a few times, and that is the difference between income and earnings. What's the difference between income and and earnings?
Okay, so we actually go back to that slide. So, but income is just all of the different, so income can come from a lot of different places. Earnings is usually specifically tied to employment. And there's a really, really specific definition for that one. I will make sure that it's included in here. I'm getting an echo, I apologize for that. But the earnings is usually assigned to employment, and then income can be from alimony, from child support, from government programs, things along those lines too. But I will make sure to include that in the notes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go back to the very beginning just because I think if we can see it a few more times, that's helpful. Going back to advanced search so that you won't have to be somebody who's wondering where that is, because it happens a lot. And this time we're going to look at counties. So we're going to look at counties, and we're going to specifically look at income by county. And I'm in Texas. I'm outside of Austin, Texas right now. So we're going to go to Texas, and it's big. So there's a lot of counties. There's a lot of information to look at here. But I also want you guys to all see like how this works. And again, this can be for any county, any of the geographies we talked about. I'm going to do all counties within Texas. It's going to think about it for a second. More than a second, because this is live, and so it will always take longer when you're live. If you really want this to be fast, like Saturday night at midnight, or I guess 11:59, it's super quick. Okay, so we've got our geography chosen. We're going to go down and choose the American Community Survey, just because we have already been focused on that. But in theory, if you don't choose a survey and you just choose a topic, it'll come up with the most popular data sets that we have for that topic. So it's not a bad thing to do. But specifically because we've been talking about the American Community Survey, we're going to go back here. Actually, I'm totally lying. We're not going to go to the American Community Survey, because it's going to force us here. So I'm just going to go to income and poverty. Income and earnings, since this was specifically brought up, these are the breakdown here. I'm going to go back. I'm actually just going to go to income and poverty. And the nice thing about this is it's going to choose for you, when it chooses your results, it's going to choose the tables that when somebody was when everybody else was looking at it, what they most often chose. So it's going to give you kind of the highest, heaviest hitters. And then it's also going to give you the most recent data available. So you never have to worry about like clicking on a table and finding out it's 12 years old and it just happened to be at the top. It's always going to populate the most popular and then the most current data that we have available. So I'll click on search, and luckily, thank goodness, it came up with American Community Survey first. Most of the time that will happen, it's our biggest household survey. It's our most popular data set. And I'm going to click on income in the past 12 months for 2023 inflation adjusted dollars. Okay, this comes up a lot. It's kind of fibbing. You can open the table, and I would suggest that you can always download it and look at it that way, but a lot of times, honestly, even for me still, I'm not choosing what I mean to, so you usually will want to see it ahead of time. So these are all the counties in Texas. Here are all of the breakdowns of income that we have available, and then household income, family income, and non-family income. So let's look at, I'm going to download it really quickly. Well, I'm going to download it really quickly just because it's easier to look at with the group. But it will come up with all these tables. So if you want to compare 2023 to 2022, 2021, you can download as many files as you'd like. If you just specifically want to look at one of the data sources, we're going to do the 5-year estimates. It's going to download into a zip. I'll show you what that looks like too. I want to make sure we're checking all the boxes here. So when you get in there, in theory, you've seen it all. Why is it not moving? Okay. There are 3 different files that when you download a zip file, it will bring you. So here's your notes on the table. Pretty straightforward. It's really similar to that first Excel page that we had. It's really talking to you about information about where the data came from. Here is your column. So this will tell you all of the different columns. Slowly. Here are all of your different column headings. And then last but not least, and you can always tell because it's the largest one, where'd it just go? Here's your actual data. So it's always going to be the largest file. And this is where that actual information is. So depending on how you could also, there's different ways that you could do this. But this is, if you want all of this information by all of the different counties in Texas or any other place as well, a quick and easy way to look at it. So you could then go back and look at income across these different counties and do a comparison. If you want to, you can add in higher level geographies. So you could add in the United States here, and it would be the first one that shows up. So you could do that kind of across the board comparison, especially if you're looking at a smaller state that you want more of a threshold for. But this is what those data sets will look like. Starts with the GeoID, and then the geographic name, which will probably be much more useful to you, and then all of the different columns that was on that previous file that we opened. Okay, I'm doing one more, and then we'll take questions. All right, I'm going back to the very beginning one last time, and then to advanced search. And this time we're going to look specifically at poverty. So I'm going to go to census tracts. Again, we don't have time to go into this, but I will make sure that I include a geography webinar when we send all this out. Census tracts are those chunks of land that are about 4,000 people. And I'm going to go to a smaller state that we can really look at how these lower level geographies compare. So let's go to Wyoming. Let's go to Wyoming. And we're going to do all census tracts in Wyoming. And then we're going to go to income and poverty, and specifically poverty. And we're going to look at the official poverty measure. That's what the American Community Survey uses. All right. So I'm going to click search, and we're going to just go straight to the map because I want to make sure that I think you guys, the tables are pretty straightforward. And we're instead of clicking on table, we're going to go to map. And what this will do is it's going to, there's Wyoming. I promise you it's not normally this slow, even when it's not midnight on Saturday. It's just doing it to mess with me. There we go. Okay. So these are all the census tracts. These are chunks of land with about 4,000 people in them. And you can really see where those people living in poverty are. So these are really high percentages. Also, I should mention too, if you click on any of these, it'll give you this kind of pop-up that gives you some basic information. But census tracts, so 23.6%. You're looking over here, 21. Looking here, 20. some smaller pockets here at 27. So you can really see where those pockets of needs are. Okay, I'm going to pause there now that we have a whole 3 minutes left. What questions do you have for me, guys? I know you can all talk fast. I've seen you do it. Yeah.
So yes, we have a question. Is the data available by specific tribal affiliation for Native Americans and Alaska Natives?
So it is by geography. So there's two different ways that we'll publish that data, right? So we have data on people that are affiliated with the tribe, no matter where they're located. And then we also have data based on the geography, so like the physical lands. So yes, we do have that data available for both options.
Okay. Now, does a
What else you got?
does a foster child being paid to take care of count as a family member?
It does not for this official measure. So there's also a supplemental poverty measure, and they are foster children and actually any other members of the household are included in those. That's not exactly true, but foster children are included in that, but it is not for this official, like the one that's been around since 1963. It's only blood marriage or adoption. And I was adopted. There's a lot of different places. People make families in a lot of different ways, more than they did in the 60s. So if you're looking for something that's a little more kind of a sign of the times and how families are put together now, the supplemental one might be a better option for you, but that's not how we measure it for the American Community Survey. Please send me an email. I'm happy to walk you through data sources for that if you're specifically studying foster families.
Okay, and well, not on the same lines, but one more. Do you have disabled populations included specifically?
We do. There are 5 main categories we have disability data for, and it's self-defined. So it's cognitive, vision, hearing, self-care, and ambulatory. And we do have information broken down there as well. We didn't have time to go through it today, but it's definitely on data.census.gov. And if you get stuck, just send me an email.
Okay. And okay, I said last one is 3. I will turn it back over to you.
Sorry, guys, I talked a little longer than I expected. But thank you for that, Crystal. And then here's my contact information. Here's our branch's contact information too. We really are here to help you. We've been stuck wherever you get stuck, so let us know. Don't spend your time alone in a dark room trying to figure this out on your own. We're here for you. So with that, I will turn it back over. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Lacey. Thank you, everyone. Again, these questions and responses will be posted to our Census Academy page in the next 30 days. So before we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who played a role in today's webinar. We thank you, our audience, for spending your time with us this afternoon. We are very interested in hearing from you on how we are doing. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation that will appear when you exit the webinar. That brings us to a close. We thank you again for joining us today and hope you have a great afternoon.
Webinar is ended. You may disconnect at this time.